Hello, my name is Ayomide Ayodele, and today I'll be talking about terrorism. Well, before I even start, I would like to make a confession and give you guys a little story. I didn't really write this TEDx due to the fact that I heard about some injustice that a world-famous organization had committed or some disaster that had happened. The reason that I wrote this TEDx was due to a very small and little terrorist group that keeps affecting my hometown of Nigeria that has been looked over multiple times, and even with the counter efforts is still alive today. Well, I was born in Nigeria in 2006, June 20th. My parents worked high up in the government, and they had received death threats on their life by the Boko Haram. So we decided to flee the country, but even after we had still fled the country, we still received daily reports on how Boko Haram still moves and the terrors and damages they still committed in my hometown today. The first step, I believe, in taking down terrorism is kind of understanding what terrorism really is. Terrorism is a global threat. It's a complex and multifaceted disease. Terrorism, there's several motivations behind it. There are religious, political, and even ideological ideals. Terrorism isn't designed to do things legally or find peaceful ways to solve issues. It's designed to create fear and chaos, and also disrupt social stability. But what's the impact of terrorism in our society? Terrorism has caused a decrease of social cohesion, a sense of vulnerability, and a sense of helplessness. Whenever we hear of a new terrorist group, even one of the world famous ones, having some type of huge movement, we never really think that, we have a small thought that those poor people, but we also have that thought in the back of our head of, are we next? Is there a chance that we could be the next group attacked by this terrorist group? And it's been seen even in these developing countries where these terrorist groups are, that there is a loss of trust between friends that even have known each other for multiple years of whether they can trust this person because they don't know if this person was part of this terrorist group. But what are ways that we as the US have taken to addressing terrorism? One of these ways is understanding the root causes of terrorism. We know that terrorist groups create fear and hate, but we also know that there are other things behind that. There are some very immediate underlying causes, and the immediate causes are such as political issues, ideological issues, and some underlying causes are poverty, infrastructure, hate crimes, or even targeted killings. Another way the US has been addressing terrorism is by cooperating with several other countries and also sharing intelligence between these countries. There have also been strategies that include that contribute to the appeal of terrorist groups such as poverty and political oppression. But not only are there social consequences of terrorism, there are also very large economic consequences. Terrorism damages infrastructure, it disrupts trade and commerce, in which we lose a lot of money. But also, counterterrorism efforts also are very costly and are sometimes very largely ineffective. A major way that the US uses to help fight against these terrorist groups are by using intelligence gathering and law measures. A way that they did this was by creating the Department of Homeland Security and the National Counterterrorism Center. There have also been controversial surveillance programs such as the NSA and their use of surveillance by phones and security cameras. There have also been use of drone strikes, targeted killings, and the arrest of suspected terrorists. Another way that the US has recently enforced counterterrorism efforts that's been brought more into the public eye in the more recent decade has been border security and also information sharing. There have been enhanced screening of travelers between countries to gain information based on whether these new immigrants could be possible terrorists. There have also been provided information sharing between law enforcement agencies such as the CIA and the FBI. There's also been a creation of the Terrorist Screening Center, which keeps track of known and also suspected terrorists that are within our country. Well, another way that the U.S. has fought these another counterterrorism efforts of the U.S. group has been by promoting social cohesion and social stability while still promoting more, and protection of critical infrastructure. There have been measures to protect critical infrastructure, and by critical infrastructure I mean power plants, transportation systems, water treatment plants, and hospitals. Especially in developing countries, these are some of the most important buildings to them. The ways that these security measures have been, there have been physical security measures, and there have also been cybersecurity measures. It would be blind of us to think that these terrorist groups can only attack by physical means. There has been a large use of the internet in the recent years, and we have cause to believe that these terrorist groups have also gained knowledge on how to use cyber attack protect these critical infrastructures. But even with the U.S.'s counterterrorism efforts, there have also been very negative implications for our civil liberties. There's been a large controversy over the balance between the security measures and our civil rights. There have also been criticism of these surveillance programs and these targeted killings. The criticisms of the target killings are due to the fact that civilians have also been killed while purchasing their actual target. And there have also been debates over the effectiveness of these counterterrorism efforts and whether they're really worth the cost of the money that we're spending on them. Another major concern about counterterrorism efforts are whether the NSA's movements really follow our amendment rights and stand by them. And another thing are with the USA Patriot Act that's raised concerns about our privacy violations. Such measures really don't have a large effect or are limited in helping us prevent terrorism. Another thing that has been noted with these counterterrorism efforts is that there's been an increase in prejudice and discrimination. An example of this has been ever since the 9/11 attacks, the prejudice and discrimination against Muslims, which has now been classified Islamophobia, has been on the rise since 9/11 attacks, which have led to hate crimes, social exclusions, and harassment. But I have been talking about understanding these terrorist movements and their counterterrorism efforts. But what really drives these groups? These groups are out to reach their goals by any means possible. They aren't a law enforcement agency that wants to go by the book. They don't want to do things legally. They don't want to make things right by you. They want what they want, and they will take it by any means necessary. Terrorist groups could also feel marginalized or even seek revenge for things that have happened in the past. But what are ways that we can address terrorism, and what are their consequences? Well, counterterrorism efforts have to be able to balance civil liberties and promote social cohesion. By social cohesion, I mean that we are able to stand as one, and we aren't discriminating and promoting prejudice against other races or other religions just due to the fact that a terrorist group like the Boko Haram could be using Muslim as their background, but that doesn't mean that other Muslim people are on the same platform as them. There's also education awareness campaigns that could help reduce prejudice and discriminations against these marginalized groups. Because at the end of the day, we don't really know a lot about why these groups are doing what they're doing. Sure, we could be hearing what is being said in the news, but that's only coming from one side of the story, but we never really get to see the other side of the story. And also, understanding these terrorist motivations is very crucial for preventing future terrorist programs or terrorist groups from rising. And ways that we can combat terrorism. To effectively combat terrorism, we need to be able to understand why and in what ways can we take to fix these issues that are also cost effective. We also need to address underlying issues such as poverty, inequality, and political and economic marginalization against these groups. Well, I recently was looking at ways that we as students, or even adults that don't really have a hand in the government, could still help to stop this fight against terrorism. And these were 3 ways that really kind of stood out to me. Number 1 is kind of educating yourself about the issue. It would do you no good to surely know about an issue, but not really know everything about it. There have been several campaigns for something that could be right or even morally right, but due to the fact that the person that's defending this statement or case doesn't really know what they're talking about, their judgment or even their decision-making kind of comes into question. Another way is by supporting counterterrorism efforts. Now, I'm not asking for you to support the NSA or the CIA or the USA Patriot Act and what they're doing with the violations of our civil liberties. I'm asking you to support counterterrorism efforts that provide help, resources, and food, and even money to these countries that need help with fighting these terrorist groups. And last but not least is by standing against discrimination and hate speech. Terrorist groups thrive on hate and divide. And I believe that if we can get rid of this and stand as one as a country and stand united, that we will be able to stop the future rise of terrorist groups. Thank you very much.